You're in the right classroom if you're looking to learn all about elite account planning, how strategic sales orgs win up market. We have some amazing, amazing panelists today, some fellow sales nerds who love talking about this stuff between team meetings, sales calls, etc. So really excited for today's topic and this group in particular. Maybe before we get into it, this has honestly been the most requested topic this year in terms of content. We've done stuff on stakeholder mapping, on building business cases, on building mutual action plans. And I think people are really curious to think about holistically outside of maybe some of those specific tactics. How do you think about larger upmarket deal strategy, especially in 2023? It's really tough to be selling right now. The power of CFOs who may not deeply understand your products like your champions do are coming in. And for them, it's black and white. Are we spending something? Are we not? Are we cutting? And I think you need to be really, really strategic with how you approach different accounts and especially at market this year. So really excited to share some of the learnings and honestly for myself to apply this at Accord from this group here. And again, only fun if folks are jumping in with questions. So feel free. There's either the little Q&A tab thing at the bottom or just in the chat, thoughts and questions that you have. And we'll make sure to stick to those. But to start, maybe good just to make sure we're all kind of talking about the same thing here. Maybe we'll go in reverse order. Like, what does account planning mean to you? How have you thought about this on your team? And just curious to kind of get that definition and why, you might think it's such a hot topic this year. So Kate, I'll throw it back to you.
I'll get started. For me, account planning is an umbrella term for a whole bunch of different things. But at the most basic, it's you making sure you have a plan overused, but a real strategy for the account and that you're bringing along everybody who needs to be brought along internally, especially when you're selling up market. Selling is a team sport and a lot of people need to be involved to really effectively sell, and making sure that you're all on the same page about how you're going to approach the account and what you think that account really needs is so important.
Totally. And maybe to use Jamie's dream career, it's kind of like the playbook, the play you're calling. Everyone needs to run in the right direction. If you don't have that, you might have, your deal team, everyone's running different routes and you need to be that quarterback with that game plan, right?
Well put. Yeah.
Totally. All right. Jamie, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think, a lot of this things that Kate said, I think are relevant. The way I've always thought about it is to me, account planning is thinking about the customer the way they think about themselves, right? And really taking that sort of inside perspective on it and all the things that represents. So how do they go to market? How do they make money? What do the executives get measured on? A lot of those things. And then obviously there's a people component of it, right? Understanding the organization, the politics, the partners that they have inside and outside the organization. So to me, it is really sort of reversing the view of it, not from your perspective, but from their perspective is where I've seen probably the best work be done.
Totally. Yeah. Putting yourself in their shoes, I think is always the right default in sales. And I think sometimes we overcomplicate things with our internal world and product and features and simplifying it that way. Totally. And Christina, how about yourself?
Yeah, I agree with both Kate and Jamie. I think account planning is about bringing focus and organization to the account, to your geography you might cover, kind of being the CEO of your dirt or your territory, and helps you diagnose what to spend time on. And especially for the bigger accounts, kind of what Jamie alluded is becoming an employee or acting as if you were an investor in the company and thinking about it that way. My favorite part of account planning is sort of the psychology, right? The politics, the people side, to try and map out and diagnose who you should be working with, how you should be working with them, who should be working with them. So it can be a really great strategic exercise. The only thing I would add for my definition is it's living and breathing, meaning it's not a static document that you then revisit a year from. In my opinion, I think it's like an every 30 day, maybe even every 2 weeks cadence of accountability for the account planning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good call out. And I think someone just jumped in the chat. I just sent it to the host and the panelists, but Jenny put in understanding their business and mapping that to why they should care about yours, I think is a really great summary of what everyone said here is, what's that focus? Why should they care? How are you getting your whole team to come along? And it's about them, not you, and translating that. And I think that's kind of where great sales starts and ends, is that focus around the client and why should they care? And we get so into like, who's the right person and what's the right next step? It's like, why should they even care in the first place? And always starting every call, ending every call, starting every email, everything should be around, hey, at Databricks, we have this thing upcoming, or what's the thing that's just the biggest company level priority? If we can help with that, that's why you should be prioritizing. If we can't, then we're probably not the right fit to be spending your energy on. So I think that's a really great call out.
Yeah.
Well, maybe go for it, Kate. Yeah.
Just quickly, to get really tactical too, I think that some people think account planning can be done in Salesforce or your CRM. I've always found that it's a separate doc. I really liked what you said, Christina. It's a living doc. A lot of people contribute to it internally. I think the most important section of that doc I often find is the relationship map. A few of us alluded to this. Who's over there? What do they care about most? What job do they have now? What job did they have recently? Like, what perspective can they bring to the deal? Who on our side is paired with them to make sure that we're engaging them appropriately? So go over there. So to get really tactical, because I know that's like some of the most helpful parts of webinars like these. It's like, it's an actual, we use Google internally at Stripe and now at Anthropic as well, but it's a shared document, sometimes even shared externally as well.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really good call out. Well, maybe to flip it on its head a little bit, and again, feel free to jump into the chat or the Q&A. What do we think you've seen either leaders or frontline reps get wrong when it comes to account planning? I'll maybe jump in with something that I see constantly, is so much detail in terms of like heuristics about the company. I think so many people think an account plan is like, just when was the company founded? Where is it based? Who the top, these 5 executives are. I'm like, that doesn't help you at all figure out why you should care about, Anthropic or Salesforce or, Databricks or Accord. And it's just these like, oh, I did my research, right? I went to their website. I know what the product is, and that's my account plan. So I'm curious what you've seen, where you've seen people kind of shift focus from when it comes to account planning. Jamie, maybe I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, I think, I agree with everybody that has said it has to be this living, breathing thing. I think the mistakes, particularly in an organization, is account plans become sort of a checkbox. You do it early in the year, and then you kind of file it away, and it dies. It has to be this collaborative thing, and it absolutely has to be a shared plan, particularly in the enterprise. I was, and I think Christina was probably exposed to it at Salesforce as well. There's an organization called Corporate Visions, and they have a methodology around something called the buyer's perspective. And I think it's a really digestible template that they have, which kind of starts with like how the executives get measured. And then what are the external factors that are impacting that industry or that organization? Because I think if you sort of start there, like a lot of organizations just kind of start with, the specifics of like how you make money or how you go to market or who the competitors are, but don't stop to think about what's really going to resonate with the executives. Like, and if you can understand how they get measured, maybe how they get bonused, when you understand their initiatives, I think it's a lot easier to map to solving those problems. Because if you're just a product salesperson and you're just focused on sort of how your product solves a specific problem, you might be missing like how they actually go measure success for that. So I think it's getting everybody that's on that customer relationship to all be moving towards the same goal and the same objective, and being able to measure it, that I think is really important, because we all have different roles and responsibilities, particularly in the enterprise. We throw a bunch of resources and everybody kind of goes, sort of roughshod into an organization. And sometimes it's that alignment and continually measuring what the impact is that you're going to have to that organization, I think is critically important, because if that's not aligned, you can get kind of lost.
So how do you, maybe just to double click there with like an output of that, what's an example that you've done at your teams to make sure that, the quarterbacks on those deals are really focusing on what those outcomes are for those leaders.
It's a really simple tactical thing for me, which is just to start every meeting with those objectives, to reinforce, like just to remind everybody that touches that. A lot of people come in and out, you know, like an executive, right? You'll, hey, so-and-so is going to be in New York. We'd like to get so-and-so connected with so-and-so. I think it's always just important that you're always sort of reestablishing. It's almost the core principles of that account, and just every account planning, however you tactically operationalize account planning. But if you start every meeting with reinforcing that, it's hard not to. It's almost like a corporate culture within an account.
Totally. Yeah. I think the best teams I've seen have that rigor around what's the expression? Inspect what you expect.
Yeah. Right.
And I think it's like, hey, if you're asking people to do this, if you're not just on the comments, no one shows how to do this. If you're not, hey, this is the template, this is the way that we do it here, this is what the best rep on the team, let's have them walk through it on Friday for 30 minutes, how they've done their last deals. I think we did a good job, Kate and our team, at Stripe doing that. Is like, what won us the deal? What was that thing that we learned this week? And going back to that, just asking people to do the thing, I think is really unhelpful. And I think inspection gets a really bad rap around like, oh, we're having to talk about the deals that people, shouldn't they be doing it really well? It's like, no, this should be a team sport and sharing best practices. So yeah. Any other thoughts to jump off of what Jamie shared, Kate or Christina?
One comment is, I had a leader on my team, Edmonds. I'll give him a shout out. He used to put Post-its, which I think he eventually got laminated, I can't remember, on everybody's laptop that said, what do they do? How do they make money? Because people would engage executives or people on the team without actually knowing, like they'd read it off the website, you know, and when they just needed to say they sell freezers, just say it. They make money, they make a margin of every freezer they sell or whatever it is. And I think sometimes as AEs, especially earlier in their career, they get so lost in the jargon or not understanding, and they're maybe afraid to ask too. So pushing them that this, I'm going to ask you, it's on your laptop, like in our 101s, we're going to be asking, what do they do and how do they make money? It gets ingrained, to Jamie's point, on the way they're then asking customers in the future.
Yeah, and just double clicking on both of those, I think both of you alluded to the idea that sometimes account plans have so much detail that just doesn't matter. I can't tell you how many account plans I've seen where someone clearly cut and pasted a Wikipedia page or a pitch book page or some sort of profile. And I'm like, I'm glad you found the company on that website, but this doesn't tell me really anything about how you're planning to sell. And so really getting to the so what is so important. What do they care about? What does your champion care about? How is your champion going to get promoted as a result of helping you win this deal? That's really the point of thinking through a detailed account plan, is making sure you can put yourself in their shoes and really, really get what their goals are.
Well put. Yeah, I think probably the most common, well, either one, just not doing it, or two, just the like 7-page account plan, everything. And then how are you going to edit this? Feels overwhelming. You're not going to keep up with that. You know, I would suggest, and we're seeing some people jump in with, you know, requests for templates. We put something short together too on Google Docs that we'll share with everyone. Also, feel free to check out Accord. This is what we help folks do. But I would say, like, if you're not doing it yet, like 5 bullet points. Like, start with something that's super, super simple to build that culture. Maybe it turns into 7. Maybe that comes from your team and a shared win on the team, where then everyone else feels like it's easier to adopt that because they understand why we're doing this extra work. So yeah, I think, yeah, falls short when there's like 1,700 questions or there's nothing needed. And Charlie, great point jumping in. I think the 3 most important factors you just nailed: business objectives tied back to senior leadership. What do they care about? Do they need to go global this year? And that's what they told the street. Do they need to reduce costs and grow gross margins relative to another company that's in the public market and they're about to IPO? Like, sometimes it can be as simple as saying the same thing over and over and over again that you're reading online that ends up being the strategic initiative of why they're going to buy your thing. So definitely make sure you focus on that. Well, maybe we'll pause. And I'm sure everyone on all the guests here are okay with some awkward silence. We're going to pause. We're going to get some questions from the audience here. Feel free to drop in the comments or Q&A. We'd love to hear what, you know, the 93 people that decided to take, 45 minutes out of their day to get better. What questions or comments do you have around account plan that would be helpful to cover with this awesome group, feel free to jump in. Need some background elevator music. Don't be shy. I know we got a bunch of salespeople here. Okay, Charlie, thanks for bailing everyone out. What are your favorite ways to capture account plans? And then we got another question. Can we walk? Oh, now it's flooding in. Thank you, Charlie. You broke the ice here. We walk through best practice around initiative gathering, how to prioritize accounts. Actually, let's double click because I think we've talked a little bit about, the docs and the sheets. Let's talk about the initiative gathering. How do you translate us talking about, oh, it's all about outcomes, it's all about executive things? Like, how do you put that into sentences? What are some of those questions, and how do you, what is the output of that? So yeah, maybe back to Christina. What are you seeing some good ways of getting to those, maybe not champion level initiatives, but like executive level initiatives, the things that don't get reprioritized at a company?
Yeah, so I've got 2 points there. I think one is the obvious stuff, like listening to the earnings calls or listening to them on a podcast, like listen to them in a webinar. You'll learn a lot after you just listen and do some research that you then can position to them. But the only thing I'll say is I think sometimes people jump to the like, hey, I heard in an earnings call that you said you needed to go global. Tell me more about that. They don't know you. They don't trust you yet. So I think the trust building exercise of getting familiar with them, whether it's through their values, through their hobbies, there's different techniques you can do and be creative to get in front of them so that you then build the trust so they actually tell you what really is going on, I think is the most important element. And the strategy around that, it can be done in account planning. So one of the mistakes I find people make is that they will align executives on the team they're targeting based on title. So they'll say, oh, the CEO, Jamie's our highest salesperson. He needs to be aligned to the CEO. Maybe Jamie has nothing in common with the CEO, but maybe our co-prime leader or one of our product leaders, they actually have a lot in common, or they went to the same school. Let's pair them up and have them go and meet so that they can build trust, so they can actually tell me the initiatives that are actually being talked about and prioritized in the board meeting. So I would say there's definitely ways to get it surface level, but be creative with building a relationship so you can get beyond the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. I think sometimes we can get caught up with like going to that training or reading that sales book and be like, that's a fantastic question. You can ask terrible questions, but like with the right permission from building trust and being seen as that advisor, where it almost doesn't matter. Just in that conversation, these things come up. And I think that's a great reminder, especially when we talk about some of the more strategy aspects, like sales is 50% art and 50% science. And the art part of it is the relationship. And like, you can't do any of these things, account planning, business cases, without that relationship first. So it's a really, really good reminder for this session. Awesome. Yeah. Kate, what have you seen? How have you seen some great reps get to the core of the leadership initiatives that get deals done? Those trains, as Skip would say.
I was just going to say, well, first of all, I'll shout you out. You are always the best at this, Ross. So you make sure you're sharing your own tips and tricks here. I think that this sounds so simple, but once you've built the trust, don't be shy to just ask. A lot of people you end up talking to are actually building the slides for the board deck. It is shocking how many people will share the slides to the board deck if you just ask them or screenshot them. And you think that you might not be able to ask that really hard question because it's so proprietary, etc. If you really have built up a champion and you absolutely need to invest in building up a champion, they will share a lot of information with you to help you and to sell with you internally. So one, just don't be shy and really ask once you've built that trust. We already talked a little bit about how to build the trust. And then 2, do your homework, not just in the normal places. Find an opportunity where someone has spoken on a webinar like this or issued a press release. Companies love to tell the world what their priorities are. You just have to go find out where they're talking. Show up at the like if you can get invited, show up at the company event, show up at an event that has something to do with their industry. Companies do really talk about themselves quite a bit if you know where to look.
Yeah, one of my
Love that.
favorite
Get
things for
creative.
that is go search episodes, like in Spotify or Apple. Go plug in their name, Ross Rich in quotes. He's probably spoken on some podcast at some point in his life, maybe not, but if they're a big enough company, somebody there has, and they get pretty candid in a lot of them. So I've gotten a lot of good information from that.
And if you do take the time to really listen to them, you can actually start to learn the language that folks use internally. And if you play back questions using their language, you're so much more likely to get information that you want.
Yeah, I'd also say this is a really important time of year and for a lot of organizations, right? Because it's many organizations are on sort of calendar year, fiscal year. So this is the time that everybody's submitting budgets, right? So just show up and ask what's going in the budget next year, what was in the budget this year, right? Like you can get a really good understanding of what the top initiatives are just simply by how they prioritize what's going in the budget and what's not going in the budget. I think that's a really good way to find the initiatives. I think the other one is, I think it's really important to come with a point of view that you don't always have, right? But what you do have is you have access to things like Deloitte, McKinsey, Accenture. They all put out reports on industries, right? So if you're meeting with somebody and you don't actually know what matters to them, one of the things you can say is, look, I don't know you, but I know people that look like you, right? In your industry. And what I've seen is these are the top 3 or 4 things that sort of are facing them. Many times that, particularly as an executive, they can't wait to tell you how wrong you are. They can't wait to tell you how little you know about their organization, but they will tell you. Versus if you go into them and say, hey, tell me what keeps you up at night, or tell me what your top initiatives are, and they'll probably kick you out of their office. But I think if you come in with a point of view that's well researched and sort of lead the witness, that they'll tell you, yes, you're on the right path, or you couldn't be more wrong because I'm a snowflake, right? So
I love that, Jamie. I think that there's so much wisdom in the idea that someone is so much more likely to correct you than to just tell you something. And so if you make an assumption, it's totally okay if it's wrong. To your point, it has to be well researched, but you'll probably get a lot more information by having done that. Yeah, just big +1.
I think it's a great reminder to leaders out there, as I think, and I do this all the time with folks that are joining a court. I think I take for granted how much I have learned about our buyers, and I come with that perspective. And I'm thinking back to some of the best deals that I did, even converting leads to ops, not even closing deals. Why do people want to spend more time with you? Because you're going to help them with their job. Well, if you're someone just asking questions and the best questions, and like, it doesn't matter. You need to come to be someone that they think is worth spending time with. And some of the best reps, I think, are just great relationship builders, not because they're schmoozing, but because they're helping them do their job. They're that consultant. And I think that's something, as we think about account planning, what is our point of view with this persona, with this account? I think that's actually something that I've never put in those plans. And I think I take for granted because I love to get to be such an expert around the persona, around the space that we work in. And I think maybe some of the best sellers and best sales leaders take for granted that might not be the default for the 50th percentile rep that's on your team. And so maybe that's something that I would probably add to ours is, what's our point of view related to this market or this type of company? For example, if we sell to someone that isn't SaaS, doesn't make money when they sign, and they only make money when they go live, our point of view with them is actually that's not a solvable problem post-sales. That's a problem that you can just solve in sales. You're probably not talking to the right level person. You're probably not building a strong enough business case to actually get them to activate. And you're doing this like mid-funnel activity to get them to sign to not actually go live. So like that's a strong point of view that we have that not everyone's going to share. And the right person's going to nod along to that or totally disagree. And so what is that for your company, and how do you share that with your team? I think is a really great tidbit that I'm gonna take from this.
Yeah, Ross, you had a good call out there. Just a quick ad, and Christina said something about it in the chat too, that I think COVID kind of broke people, a lot of sellers. Like a lot of people got comfortable selling in these little windows and forgot, like, hey, getting on an airplane or getting in your car and going physically to go see somebody is still a really important thing to build that personal relationship. And I think oftentimes, like, we condition sellers to like go high into an organization the trap there is if you go high into an organization and you don't have a perspective on their business or their job, you may never, ever get that conversation again. So I think one of the things that I always encourage sellers to do is, go get on an airplane and go ask somebody for coffee or lunch or dinner, like that is a practitioner that will tell you where the dead bodies are, that will tell you where the inefficiencies in their process or their organization are. So now when you go to the executive, like you come in with actual material data that you can then come in with a stronger point of view. And I think sometimes we kind of forget to go do that. And COVID, I think, I think it just kind of, it broke a lot of people as far as just understanding how important those personal face-to-face relationships are.
Yeah, if I could add something to that, I can't agree with you more, Jamie. And actually, a lot of people on my teams after COVID had never been on site because they were hired and developed and trained, and they were early in their sales career, so they'd never had that training, and they were very unsure of what to do. Like, I'm at dinner with the CTO, but like, what do I say? And I was like, you just ask a million questions. Your job is to keep them talking as much as possible and be curious and learn. But also, I like the point about going sort of lower in the organization just to gather the information, but think non-traditional. So there's the lunch, there's the dinner, there's the coffee. I also, there were some women leaders that we would be like, let's go get manicures together. You got to get your nails done anyway. Let's go do that. Right. Or maybe you're a huge fan of this concert in town, or maybe, we're having an event already at a Packers game. And I know I've noticed that on your Twitter, you've got that, profile, whatever it is. Pick something that you enjoy doing and you're already in your natural state, and maybe they do too. And then you can really let down some of the trust barriers, and then they'll feel like, wow, you've touched on something that I like or that I enjoy, but you're also in an environment that's not so traditional, and they might loosen up a bit more. So just think non-traditional in addition to traditional methods of events or engagements.
And just to like very specifically add to that, I love that you just said that. And I think it's so important, especially early in your relationship, sitting across the table from one another can be really intimidating. So getting outside, taking a walk, walking side by side so you're not staring at each other can be a great way to get someone to open up. It's like a very specific tactical thing, but you can get a lot of information to bring it back to account planning that will be so valuable if somebody feels comfortable and will share.
Totally. Yeah, I think, and you mentioned it as well, like this isn't a late stage thing. We're trying to build a point of view. We're trying to gather this information. Go early, show that if it's a really good fit account, hey, I'm really excited because what you're trying to solve and that conviction, I think, comes across in a deal. And obviously, they know you can't be doing this with every account too. Like they know you get paid from selling accounts. You're not just going out because like, you had some great first conversation. Like, hey, I'm really excited about, we've solved this problem with two other companies. Would love to better understand how we might be able to do that, not close them. Yeah, go for that coffee. Take them to, some restaurant that they wouldn't take themselves because it's a B2B budget, whatever it is, and get that information to take back to those key stakeholders. And you're going to blow some CEOs, CROs' minds with an email that says, hey, talk to, your VP, your director, whatever. And it sounds like these are the key focus areas. We help whatever other companies that they're going to know. Like that's the cold email that people are going to respond to, not the super generic thing. This is, who we are and we're a security platform, whatever. So I think this is some really good tactical tips. So we got 10 minutes to go. Any other from the panelists here, any other things that you think are worth sharing, or we can pick from the 20 questions after the awkward silence that everyone added to.
There were a couple of comments in here about involving account managers, CSMs, BDRs, account planning process. Just want to reiterate again, this is a team sport and everybody should be involved in the account plan to the extent possible, but the AE should own the account plan and be the quarterback. So there is accountability and ownership. That's how we've always operated. I'm curious to hear how it works at your other companies too.
Yeah, Kate, actually to that point. So we invite everyone and we encourage everyone to participate was the sort of the approach. Like, hey, you're on the team. We're going to invite you. You show up. You're going to get a role assigned. You're going to have an action to go take, and we're going to keep you accountable for it. But it is optional for them to attend, because if they're like a CSM across 100 accounts or however, it depends, right? But we want each person to take a role, and then each person have a point of view. My one little caveat here is sometimes account planning can be an excuse to overanalyze and to sit before you just pick up the phone. So put a time limit on it. Like maybe I'm going to do, like one of our leaders, Shaquille Lamba, who's a VP, used to do, like, he called them LAPDs, large account planning days. And he would do one day, and he would invite the whole team, and they would do hours of account planning, and they would do it that way. I know sometimes you do a whole day on an account. Sometimes it's just kind of updates via Slack or Record or other tools, where it's like a weekly update that you can kind of keep the cadence, but putting a time limit on it so people don't go into paralysis mode, or they just need to go out, to Jamie's point, and go talk to them as well, to balance the two. But I think the team component is incredibly important in the beginning.
How do you hold those other stakeholders accountable? So let's say you bring in the CSMs, you bring in the SEs, maybe you're trying to get more executive sponsors on deals, which is like a whole other topic that I'd love to talk about another time. Like, how do you drive that accountability and urgency when maybe they're working on, maybe their 90% is not your 90%?
I think somebody asked that in the window as well. And I just think if it doesn't matter to the executive, it's not going to matter to anybody, right? Like it literally has to be, in my opinion, a top-down thing, right? If like most competencies are sort of, most teams are competency based, right? So it's different leadership teams. But if you're not sort of driving that from the top about the importance of that and sort of reinforcing it, I think reinforcement's a big part of it, to share successes and failures where that stuff breaks down or where that stuff is leading to a really successful outcome. So I think part of it is it has to matter to the executives, or it will matter to nobody. And I think the second thing is just, you have to share. You have to share what's working, what's not working. I mean, I still spend time on a monthly basis with every BDR that supports my business. I think it's critically important. And to invest in them, but also just sort of as a teaching moment to find out from them what's working and not working. And I think when you get buy-in from people by letting them know that hour spent or 45 minutes spent is going to be worthwhile for them, I think it's just a really good way to make sure that everybody makes an investment in the time.
Yeah, we always invited the highest level of leadership. They didn't always show up every week, but like, for example, we'd have a weekly cadence of accountability on our top account. It's 15 minutes every Friday morning, and the leader was always invited. And then I was that leader, so I would drop in every 3 meetings, and they never really knew when I was going to drop in, and not in a scary way, but like, how was the accountability going? What can I do to help? And I would roll up my sleeves and I would be involved too. But I think having Jamie's point, having the leader on the invite, on the Slack group, on the Accord group, whatever it is, that they can see it as well and engage, it dramatically changes behavior.
Hey, one other thing to add is just this, it goes back to something we said at the very, very beginning, which is to get the account plan to be the so what. If the account plan has the meat of, here's what we need to do as an organization and as a team to do well with this account and do well by our customers, people will be incentivized to care. Leadership will naturally be incentivized to care. If the account plan is a readout of a Wikipedia page, nobody wants to come and hear that, because it doesn't actually matter to make us all successful.
Yeah,
it does go back to that template and making sure we're holding ourselves to high standards on what we put together in the first place.
Totally. These things need to matter. There needs to be like a celebration of the good. There needs to be accountability of the needs improvement. It needs to be shared across the business. And I think it's so hard for leaders to find this time, but so important. And I think sometimes you can get caught up with stuff that might matter less. It's funny because it might seem higher level, but like the details, like a rep, like you're in a group and there's a meeting of 10 or 20 people and they're going through these deals or quarterly business review. And you're like, hey, how can I help with these things? Like getting involved, that 10-minute to send and edit an email on, for one rep that month is going to make all the difference. So I think that it's a big ask for leaders out there that are trying to build more rigor around strategic selling and accountability. But yeah, it kind of starts and ends. There's only so much you can do as a top seller or manager.
It's interesting, Ross, what you're saying, because like, I think, if you back up from, I've, for whatever reason, right, wrong, or indifferent, I've hired a lot of people, onboarded a lot of people, and that's it's rough, right? It's like getting people to productivity. It's a challenge, no matter what the organization is, no matter what you sell. think if you go back to where people are struggling to be productive, you will many times see that there is a lack of account planning, right? You will often see that there's not a plan. It's literally smiling and dialing and trying to get anybody to pick up the phone, and not this sort of thoughtful, cohesive plan. And I think that's why, for frontline leaders, I always say, like, that has to be part of the 4 or 5 things that matter and that are called out and that you manage throughout the year. It can't be a Q1 thing right before a QBR that you do and then never do it again. Like, it has to be in the DNA of everything you do. And I think when you see people, I shouldn't say failing, struggling to be productive, you can trace it a lot of times back to a lack of a coherent territory plan or account plan.
That's really well done. And there's one other question, and the theme that really draws to that in some of the questions here in the chat, which is, does this only matter for enterprise accounts, for really large accounts? And I would say the answer is no. And it goes right back to what you were saying, Jamie. Having a point of view on every account that you're talking to and why you're talking to them really matters and helps everybody drive towards the same successes. Do they have to be 3-page Google Docs that you review every Friday for 15 minutes? Absolutely not. That would be impossible. But can you have a shared point of view where you're subbing in a few sentences about what the SMB does specifically that really helps you to sell? Yes, absolutely. And making sure you're aligned on that and doing that homework is so important.
Totally. Well, we got a few more minutes here. Either from folks listening in, appreciate the engagement. I think this is one of the best set of questions and comments that we've had in a masterclass. So any kind of final takeaways, Christina, Jamie, Kate, that you'd want to share based on this theme? I mean, the thing that I'm going back to actually is I think we go through deal reviews regularly, but maybe not account plans as much as we should, especially for things that are maybe a quarter out or a month or 2 out versus closing now. That's like a good thing that we're going to probably change, is how do we put 45 minutes, an hour in the calendar to share some of those plannings and best practices, and then maybe making it less about the what of the company and the why, and actually getting, doing more research, listening to podcasts, getting on site earlier to get a better why that might be super unique to how a core can talk about the problem versus someone else. But yeah, any other kind of good takeaways either from this session that you want to share with the world?
I mean, I'll just quickly call out, I think Richard Duffy had a great call there. Just be authentic and be intentional, I think, is a really good point. I think, I think a lot of people say you want to get your customer on a text relationship. If you get them on a text relationship, you've really done your job, because there is a trust factor there. And I think Kate brought that up earlier. Like, it starts with being just really authentic and intentional. Like, it's okay to say my job is to sell you something. My job, but I want it to be valuable to you. And sort of just that upfront contract you have with the people you're meeting with, I think is critically important. There's something in it for both of you, and being upfront and honest about that will build trust. And I think that's ultimately when you do get to those relationships where you can pick up your mobile phone and send a text, and you're probably going to get a response.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the only thing I would add is I'd say 2 things. I think one, which it might be controversial, but don't be afraid to throw out the account plan, revise the account plan, stop targeting the account, walk away if it's not going to happen. Your time is finite. And, I remember there was a company we were targeting. They were a forklift manufacturer, and they were huge, and they had tons of global locations, and they were growing, but there was just not an appetite for technology at the executive level. The priorities were not there. And we just couldn't spend any more time trying to break down that door. And we were in a position, it was a team where you had multiple accounts. Not everybody has that. Like, if you have one account, it's different. But even think about how you shift the approach, the account plan. Don't be afraid to be like, it's not working. I need to shift the approach or the technique or what I'm selling or who I'm selling to, or maybe it's the account altogether. The second component, I saw it in the chat. I'm really passionate about events. I'm really passionate about on-sites. And customizing events. So this is one technique. I talked about like the one-on-one manicure pedicure thing, but one thing you can do is find something that's interesting to an executive on the team that you're trying to target. So let's say the CEO is a huge Packers fan. Build an event for your customers, not just for that person, for the customers at the Packers, and invite them and have them bring a +1. So one, they see other people using your product and they feel like they're not alone, everyone else is doing it. Two, the +1 is really powerful for prospects if you can get them to invite a son or a daughter or a spouse. So plan an event around. So there was a CEO who we were targeting, and he was really a fan of indie music. We'd done a bunch of research on Twitter. We knew he liked indie music, so we did like a indie music concert, and then we had tickets, and then we had a little box, and we invited him. He actually didn't go, but got him to respond. So it's just interesting how you can plan events that are in line with somebody's values or hobbies, not even centered around them, and get their attention to get them involved. So that's the only thing I'll say about events. I think it can be helpful.
Good call.
Taylor Swift would be powerful. If you got some tickets to Taylor Swift,
Deal one.
ROI
Instant commit. Instant commit on that deal. Awesome. Well, I know we're a minute over now. We'll let everyone get back to their busy schedules and hopefully executing like we're talking about the theory on this call. But huge thank you to Christina, Jamie, Kate for making the time to share some of your hard-earned lessons and knowledge here. And I appreciate everyone's engagement in the chat. So hopefully this was helpful to folks trying to close some deals and with a pretty tough market out there.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.